Hello students and welcome! Today we're going to discuss a very important topic from your civics syllabus, and that is power sharing. So what is it? And why is it so absolutely essential for a country to do well? Let's find out together.
You know, when we think about the word democracy, a few things come to mind, right? Elections, voting, the party that gets the most votes, they form the government. But is that all there is to it? Is democracy simply about the majority always getting what it wants? It's a question worth thinking about.
The simple answer is no, it's not just about majority rule. For a democracy to be strong, to be united, power cannot be held by just one group. It has to be shared, and shared intelligently. Today, we will understand exactly why this sharing is so critical for any democratic country's success.
Now, to understand this big idea, the best way is to look at some real-world examples. So, we'll look at the stories of two countries, Belgium and Sri Lanka. And you will see how they took very different paths, which led to very different results.
Now, on the surface, Belgium in Europe and Sri Lanka in Asia seem quite different. But both these small countries faced a very similar challenge. They both had complex populations with different groups of people who spoke different languages. This diversity was a real test for their democracies.
Okay, so first, let's look at Belgium. As you can see, the country has a pretty complex ethnic mix. About 59% of the people speak Dutch, 40% speak French, and a tiny 1% speak German. But here is the interesting part. In the capital city Brussels, it's the other way around. The French speakers are the majority there. So think about that. The group that is the majority in the country is actually a minority in the capital city. A very tricky situation to handle, don't you think?
Now, let's travel to Sri Lanka. Here, the situation was a little less complex, but the results were just as important. The Sinhala-speaking community made up a very large majority, 74%, and the Tamil speakers were a significant minority, at 18%. This simple fact would have a huge impact on the country's future.
So after Sri Lanka became independent in 1948, how did it deal with this diversity? Well, let us look at the path that it chose, a path that, very sadly, led to a lot of conflict.
Sri Lanka followed a policy called majoritarianism. Now, this is a very important term, students. Please make a note of it. Majoritarianism is the belief that the majority community should be able to rule a country in any way it wants, completely ignoring the wishes and the needs of the minority.
So what did this mean in practice? Well, the government, which was led by Sinhala leaders, took several steps. In 1956, they passed an act that made Sinhala the only official language, completely ignoring Tamil. Government policies also started to favor Sinhala applicants for university admissions and for government jobs. And on top of that, a new constitution was written to protect and promote Buddhism, the religion of the majority.
The result of all these policies was, well, it was tragic. The Tamil-speaking minority felt alienated. They felt like outsiders in their own country. They felt that their language, their culture, their rights, everything was being ignored. And over time, this feeling of distrust grew and grew until it finally exploded into a terrible civil war that lasted for decades and caused so much pain before it ended in 2009.
Now, let's contrast that very sad story with what happened in Belgium. The leaders in Belgium chose a very different and a much more innovative path, a path of what we call accommodation.
The Belgian leaders were very wise. They understood that to keep their country united, they had to respect everyone's feelings and interests. In fact, between 1970 and 1993, they amended their constitution 4 times to work out an arrangement where everyone could live together peacefully. They made sure the central government had an equal number of Dutch and French-speaking ministers. They gave many powers to the state governments. And for the capital, Brussels, they created a separate government with equal representation for both groups. And most innovatively, they created a third kind of government, the community government, to look after cultural, educational, and language-related issues.
So, as you can see, the difference could not be clearer. Belgium chose the path of accommodation, and the result was peace and unity. Sri Lanka chose the path of majoritarianism, and the result was conflict and civil war. This is the most important lesson from these stories. Accommodation brings people together, while trying to dominate leads to division. Now, these two stories bring us to the main question for today. Why is power sharing so desirable? Why is it so important? There are 2 main sets of reasons, and this is a very common question in exams, so let's understand them properly. The first type of reason is what we call a prudential reason. Now, the word prudence simply means being careful and practical.
making a smart choice based on thinking about the gains and losses.
So, what is the practical logic here? It's really quite simple. Sharing power helps to reduce the chances of conflict between different social groups. And when there is less conflict, the country has more political stability. So power sharing is a very good and practical way to make sure a country stays united and stable in the long run. It is the smart thing to do.
But there is another, deeper reason. This is the moral reason. This one is not just about being practical or smart, it is about what is right, what is fair. You see, power sharing is the very spirit of democracy itself.
To understand this, let's think about an idea called the tyranny of the majority. Just imagine a simple situation. In your classroom, what if a rule was made that only the tallest students can make all the rules? And they make rules that only help them, like they get to sit in the front or they get extra time to play. Would that be fair to everyone else? Of course not. That is exactly what the tyranny of the majority feels like. It goes against the basic idea of fairness that is so important in a democracy.
You see, a real democratic government is one where all citizens, through participation, feel like they have a stake in the system. They feel like it is their government too. People have a right to be asked, to be consulted on how they are to be governed.
So let's pause and really think about this question. Can a country truly call itself a democracy if some groups of people, some of its own citizens, are always ignored? The moral answer is no. A democracy has to be a democracy for everyone, not just for the majority.
Okay, so let's quickly recap what we have learned today. What are the key takeaways from our discussion?
We have learned that power sharing is desirable for two main reasons. First, the prudential reason. It is the smart choice because it helps avoid conflict and ensures stability. And second, the moral reason. It is the right thing to do because it is the very soul of democracy. The stories of Belgium and Sri Lanka clearly show us that accommodating everyone strengthens a country, while refusing to share power can end up destroying it.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to reflect on. A basic principle of democracy is that the people are the source of all political power. Now, if the power truly belongs to all the people, how can it possibly be right not to share that power among all the people? Think about that. Thank you.